Hey, good evening, and welcome to the second installment of the Westdale Theatre's Film Talk series in celebration of Canadian cinema. 2006 is a critically acclaimed film by director Sarah Polley, Away from Her. For those of you who've been faithfully attending these Monday night talks, we have a real treat in store for you. After Fred has completed our talk and we take a look at some highlights from the film, we will be joined by our special guest, Karen Robbins from the Alzheimer's Society of Brant, Haldimand, Norfolk, Hamilton, and Halton, who, with Fred, will answer questions you may have about tonight's film, as well as about this disease that has had a direct impact on so many of those we care most about. So, a quick note. For the best experience, what you'll want to do is use the gallery view. You should see a little icon over in the top corner of your screen. If you click on that, you'll see speaker or gallery view. Gallery tends to give you the best view that you'll need. And of course, you're old pros at this point. You know where the Q&A button is. So please feel free. We love your interactions. We love your comments. And we'll get to as many of those questions as we're able to this evening. So we have a jam-packed program for you tonight. So let's go ahead and get to it. Good evening, Fred.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Thank you, of course, for helping with all this, and very good and excited to have this talk tonight about Away from Her, and to talk a little more with Karen afterwards. Such an important subject, and for me, this is when sometimes movies and cinema really is the most powerful. When it's about human condition, it's about life. It makes you think about your own life, perhaps your relationship, parents, whatever the issue is. In this case, Alzheimer's. And I think this film did an incredible job in terms of its presentation. And I thought it'd be a wonderful thing to share. And to me, it's one of the most important Canadian films that's probably been made in the last 20 years. Sarah Polley, of course, was a very well-known child actress, and then continued to act and does continue to act later in her life. Of course, we saw her as one of the stars in Sweet Hereafter last week. And but she was still quite young, I guess about 27 or so, when she decided to take on the challenge of adapting this story. Now, of course, Away from Her is based on an incredible short story by Alice Munro, The Bear Came Over the Mountain. And it's kind of incredible to me that a 27-year-old girl read this story. As I understand it, she was on an airplane heading to Finland for a movie she was working on, and that she would read this story and choose to take on the task of not just writing the screenplay, but directing the film. And although she had made one or two short films, this is her first feature film. And I'm just kind of, it just says a lot about her own strength of character, about her skill. It's incredible to me that she actually got this done and financed and made, and it wasn't easy, but I have met Sarah, and she's the kind of personality and the commitment as an artist that when she wants to do something, she just sticks with it until it happens. And it took quite a long time to actually happen. For me, it was interesting because I saw the movie when it came out in 2006, and I thought it was a wonderful film and wonderful actors and wonderful performance, but I had never read the short story. So this time I read the short story before I watched the film, and it really changed my experience of the film pretty dramatically. And we tried to encourage you all to read the short story. We sent it as a link, as you know, and I hope some of you did. And if you did, I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts as well about the adaptation in the film and what really works and what was added and not added and everything else. So I think that would be a very interesting conversation to have, and I have some thoughts about it as well. So again, independent film made with Canadian financing, telefilm support, all tax credits, all the usual thing, although ultimately it was distributed by a Hollywood distributor, Lionsgate Films. That came much later, after a premiere at the Toronto Film Festival and Sundance and Berlin. And it was really when the critical acclaim for Julie Christie's performance started to build that Lionsgate kind of jumped on board and thought, gee, this is really something special. Maybe there's an Academy Award opportunity here. And it did get, good distribution. Obviously, outside of Julie Christie, we also have the great Gordon Pinsent. He's one of the greatest Canadian actors, been doing this for a very long time. Olympia Dukakis, I'm sure you recognized from Moonstruck and many other great films and theater. Michael Murphy, Wendy Crewson, Alberta Watson, Kristen Thomson, all wonderful actors, beautifully cast in the movie. And I think, again, the accomplishment of and what Sarah was able to do as a director and the kind of performance she had was extraordinary. The executive producer of the film is Adam Egoyan. And of course, Sarah knew him through The Sweet Hereafter, and other things, and asked him to help her as an executive producer. And I don't know exactly, his level of involvement or what exactly he did and how he helped her. But I will say that there are some elements about this film that remind me a little bit of some of Egoyan's films. I'm thinking again about the non-traditional narrative structure. We sort of jump around a bit in time, and also, of course, the performances and the incredible focus on actors and the ability to bring out these great actors. So, as I said, Sarah read as the story goes. Again, I read these things. I don't know these to be facts, but I will say that this is what I believe to be true, that she read the short story on her flight to Finland. She was going to be in a movie, which is a very interesting movie called No Such Thing, directed by Hal Hartley, very, very interesting American independent director. She read the story, and Sarah, her quote is, "I found it so moving and poignant, and it went so deep in me." And not coincidentally, her co-star in No Such Thing was Julie Christie. And Sarah just saw Fiona, Julie as Fiona the entire time she was reading the story, was absolutely, committed that this is the woman and the only woman who could possibly star in this film, and was part of the, excitement and vision that Sarah had for the movie right from the beginning. And Sarah, again, 27, 28 years old, to tell this incredible story of these older people and what they're going through. But she says she had just recently gone through a process with her own grandmother, with visiting nursing homes and had some exposure to this world. And it was something that was sort of on her mind and something that she felt that, she could possibly relate to. And then, of course, in the story, that complexity of relationship between Grant and Fiona is just so remarkably done, and the ambitious effort to try to bring it to film. But that's, ambition is a great thing, and we should always have that. Of course, there were changes. In the story, as it's really kind of told more from Grant's point of view. It's not really his, first person narrative, but you always have the feeling you're kind of looking over his shoulder and, kind of watching the characters, and the story unfolds from his perspective. But here, Sarah really kind of gives Fiona's perspective and Fiona's voice, much greater role in the film. And I think it actually works much better that way. Numerous different little changes that were made. But in the story, there's no sex. There's no sex scenes. There's no indication that, Grant and Fiona are having sex, and there's no, sexual relationship between Marion and Grant either. These were things that were added that I think worked kind of effectively. Short stories often make the best movies. And that's because they are short. They have the characters, they have the tone, but there are gaps that can be filled in, which allows the filmmaker to bring a lot of their own ideas and add to the story. Novels are actually very difficult to make into movies. They're often way too big. There's too much story. And really often with a novel, the filmmaker's job is simply to condense it and to figure out how to get through all the exposition and everything else, and what's essential and what's not essential. And if you look throughout history, many great movies were based on short stories. High Noon, Rear Window, many of the best movies. And in fact, in the old Hollywood studio days, they had two different departments. They had people who worked in their story department, and they had people worked in their screenplay department. And they, so the story department folks would work first, and either adapting a short story or writing an original story, and then the screenplay folks would come on later to actually turn it into a screenplay. Very interesting, very again, the process of screenplays, how they're developed, how they're done, is always amazing to me. I do have one quote from a Goyen. He advised her in directing and telling her, the actor is the only person who is doing something genuinely magical on set, and that has to be protected at all costs. It's a wonderful expression that is absolutely true in my experience, and all the best directors really understand that. And as much as you want to get obsessed with the cinematography or the set design or costumes or everything else, it's the actor who really should be given all the focus. And of course, like Sarah, many of the best directors were actors, and we've certainly talked about this before with Elia Kazan and many other the great classic directors. Of course, we have to talk about Alice Munro, one of the great, not just Canadian short story writers, but short story writers in the world. She won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 2013. Her work has been described as almost revolutionary in the way the architecture of her short stories, this tendency to move forward, backwards in time. Her stories, they say, have been said to embed more than announce, reveal more than parade. I think that's certainly very true of this story, The Bear Who Came Over the Mountain. Her fiction is often set in Huron County in southwestern Ontario. They often explore these human complexities, very uncomplicated prose style. People have compared her to Chekhov. She's won the Man Booker Award, 3-time winner of the Governor General Award. Her ability to kind of create this, and again, several are set in this community and in this world of southwestern Ontario, and she really created kind of a voice and a sense of place there that you see in other writers. Of course, you think of Flannery O'Connor or other writers who've taken their particular, or John Steinbeck, and kind of use that setting and those characters again and again. Very true of her work, and I think people who follow her work over the years see this, and it gives a kind of another level of depth. Very prolific. She for the last 40 years, she's had a short story collection just about every 4 years. They've appeared in, every magazine, the Paris Review, translated to 13 languages. Just an absolute master. Again, not that much happens. Another reviewer describes her work as all is based on the epiphanic moment, the sudden enlightenment, the concise, subtle, revelatory detail. Very interesting description of her work. And again, this obsession with time. So, again, the movie to me is wonderful. It's absolutely extraordinary. But there are times when you have to see what Sarah was faced with in terms of trying to create emotional access to these characters, to create more narrative in a sense, to continue, to evolve, for 90 minutes and keep you, very much, in almost a mystery as to what's going on. When Munro wrote this book, she had quite a bit of guilt and bitterness about her own mother's mental illness and was dealing with that. There's no romanticism to the short story. She doesn't let Grant off the hook. There's more ambiguity as to whether Aubrey is really a great companion for Fiona or not. It doesn't provide a lot of answers and specificity about what's going to happen. Of course, Grant's acts, where his traces of penance, right? Is that in the movie, it's very clear these are acts of penance for his many affairs and dalliances, and of course, Fiona sticking with him through all this crazy time. In the book, it's sort of less clear. She has it both ways. He's trying to atone for his past, but is it really just selfish, that he wants this atonement? And of course, Fiona doesn't really, forgive him, or does she at the end, right? I don't know. It's a very, very, I think, again, that's why this movie is so wonderful, because it doesn't, just dot all the I's. And there was a movie that was made about Alzheimer's called The Notebook. I don't know if any of you saw that, with Jenna Rollins and James Garner and Ryan Gosling. And it really shows you another way to approach this material. But in that movie, they really wanted to make it all very clear, so everybody knew, it was just sort of romantic happy ending. And this story is kind of more of a mystery, and it kind of, talks and shows us that, life is so complex, and all these emotions exist, emptiness and pain and guilt, and it's not about happy endings. I love the title, The Bear Came Over the Mountain. Of course, that's the old song, right? Why does the bear go over the mountain? To see what he could see, and all that he could see is the other side of the mountain. What a great metaphor for this whole experience, and Grant, of course, is that bear, and he's wandering around looking for something else. And of course, all the affairs, and, as a professor at that period of history, the sense you get, he wasn't really trying to, exploit these women. He wasn't taking advantage of these women. This is something that, they participated in. It was, it was part of what was going on at the time. But, he was, he's not particularly noble guy, or particularly adventurous, or particularly caring. But now at this point in his life, and of course, he does and is able to continue, and of course, because Fiona chooses to continue to be in this relationship, he's really trying to see what he can see. Julie Christie, again, we know a little bit about her, right? And of course, when she was first discovered and came on the scene back in 1965, and she was the icon of the swinging 60s, and and to have both in 1965, she was both in Darling, which she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, and Dr. Zhivago in the same year, and went on to so many other great movies: Betulia, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, another Oscar nomination, Don't Look Now, Shampoo, Heaven Can Wait. Always one of my favorite actors, but she had sort of retired and wasn't not doing a lot of work at this time. And as much as she had a relationship with Sarah and they'd been in this film together, she was reluctant to take on this part. And again, according to Sarah, it took over 7 months to convince Julie to take on the part. I can't imagine this film without her. And finally, it wasn't until Sarah had kind of given up and had cast somebody else that Joey finally decided to take this on, to be in the film, and of course that started and made everything start to happen. But something about the way she could capture Fiona's beauty, her sweetness, again, this sense of mystery, capturing that tone from the book is just absolutely amazing. There's one fantastic sequence in the book where it says she stared at Grant for a moment as if waves of wind had come beating into her face, into her head, pulling everything to rags, all rags and loose threads. Now, how do you act that? But she does it. I don't know if you guys remember this moment in the film, but she absolutely makes this happen. And that's part of her, training, certainly as a British actress, the idea that they are very committed to the text, right? So they're not, questioning what line to say or how to do, or they're following the text. They're letting the text really draw. And stage direction. In fact, Sarah put those lines in the stage direction from the short story, as I've read, and what an incredible moment. And how do you, to me, it just showed why she deservedly did win this Best Actress award. The photography was all shot in Ontario. It was mostly shot in Kitchener, a little bit in Brant and Bracebridge and Paris. The nursing home scenes were all at the Grand River Hospital in Freeport, the Freeport site in Kitchener. In fact, the actors and 60 crew members spent 2 weeks living, on the second floor of the hospital when they were shooting. The use of the camera, of course, is just fantastic. It's very subtle and not overly, dramatic, but it kind of bathes the film in the, in sort of this simple truth. And very interesting is the choice, of course, that this is not set in darkness and shadows and the gloom of winter and night, but it's all in a very brightly lit world, right? Polley has been quoted, for me, the overriding palette that we were working with was the idea of this very strong, sometimes blinding winter sunlight, and that should infuse every frame. I didn't want the visual style to draw too much focus to itself, but I felt this needed to be an elegant and simple film, and that it had to have a certain grace. So, again, I think that all was done masterfully for a first-time director. And of course, she had, great Canadian craftsmen working with her. It's heartbreaking, it's devastating, but I think at the end of the film, I don't think there's a sense of tragedy, of great tragedy. I don't know, at least for me, it's very sad, but there's sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but there's a sense of recognition. And again, there was this great line, I'm trying to find it again, from Fiona, where she talks about, all we can ask for is a sense of grace, and I think that's what happens at the end. And of course, at the end, Fiona, in a moment of potential lucidity, you could have driven away without a care in the world, and forsaken me, forsaken. And Grant says, not a chance, The other actors, Gordon Pinsent, again, you probably recognize him. He's, never went Hollywood, though he's been, of course, in some Hollywood, more of a character actor than a leading man, but many, many Gemini awards. Olympia Dukakis, she was, I thought, fantastic in this movie. Michael Murphy, who plays Aubrey, is not a Canadian, but he appears in a lot of Canadian films because for many years he was actually married to Wendy Crewson, who plays the director, Miss Montpellier. And so he often was, and he was in Toronto, but you probably might remember him for some of Woody Allen's movies, Manhattan, and Paul Mazursky's An Unmarried Woman. Kristen Thomson, who plays the nurse, again, fantastic Canadian actress. She had a one-woman play that was made into a film called I, Claudia. That's extraordinary. If you're interested, you should look for that film and learn more about her. Obviously, Sarah kind of intentionally brought some con content to this film. There's a great scene where Grant is reading to Fiona, and he's reading, a Michael Ondaatje short story, The Cinnamon Peeler's Wife. And then, of course, later on, we hear a short story from Alistair Cloud being read by Christie to Aubrey. And then, of course, the use of Canadian music, Neil Young's great song, and then, of course, K.D. Lang's cover of Neil Young's material. It was a great success. Mongo Media, it made over $1 million in Canada, which is, for English language Canada, very successful. It probably made almost $9 million internationally. Not only did Julie receive this Academy Award for Best Actor, nomination for Sarah Polley got a nomination for Best Screenplay. Very, very unusual. Certainly there have not even been a lot of women who have received those nominations, and all the reviews talk about, what an accomplished directorial, debut it was. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, a heartbreaking masterpiece. It was really kind of complimented for its low-key, intelligent setting for performances, marked by these same qualities. Many top 10 directors lists. Very, very interesting film. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about it. Again, if you haven't read the short story, I would highly recommend that. I think you would find that very interesting. But anyhow, we're going to kind of move along a little faster than usual here. And why don't we take a quick look at the slides, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts and of course, questions you might have for Karen, and questions I have for Karen as well about, sort of about the whole issue of dementia and how that was represented. Okay, so here, of course, is one of the very first images we see of Julie, Fiona. Obviously, this isn't an image of Julie Christie looking at us and then looking away. It's always interesting to me when, a very well-known actress appears in a movie, because she comes with, the audience has certain expectations, and we feel like we know this woman and we've seen her before. And sometimes that can actually be a big advantage. Sometimes it actually makes it more difficult. But to me, this, really provided something helpful in terms of, just an immediate, love for this woman, beyond being beautiful, of course, but just because of just what a open and loving soul she is in so many of her films. So let's see, let's look at the next slide. Oh yeah, of course, the opening credits, the landscape again, they're skiing together. We get this wonderful sense that the last 20 years have gone by since, he was forced into retirement, and they're together still and skiing together and, cooking together. And they've made sort of a peace in this marriage and in this life. But then the very next image, of course, is them heading off in different directions. No logic to this. I mean, this is the main titles. So why are they suddenly going in different directions? But, a very early visual cue that all is not, as perfect as it might appear to be. Next slide, please. Yeah, so, very romantic, very, again, in bed together. This was not something talked about in the short story. But you feel that there's still a very vibrant and sexual relationship between these two people. There's a lot of affection and caring for each other. I think it was an interesting choice and a wise choice. In fact, Sarah says that one of the reasons she did add these sex scenes is because when she hung around with Julie Christie and the other co-star of the movie, Helen Mirren, these are both, older women, but they both, sex was an important part of their lives still. And often in movies, if someone's over 35 years old, especially women, they're not allowed to be, involved in sexual activity or sex scenes. So I think, this was a little bit of Sarah's interest in presenting all the different aspects of this woman. Next scene. Oh yeah, so this is her out now skiing by herself, and confused. Where am I? Kind of what's going on. I just think there's so much. It's just such a wonderful performance. It never felt like there was a false note or we were being exploited or kind of taken advantage of. Next slide. Yes, again, this is her lost in the woods, and it's just a beautiful image to me, and again invokes some sense of Canada and the Canadian landscape and isolation and all those wonderful things that we think of in terms of what is Canada and Canadian storytelling that you see again and again. And then, of course, he ultimately Grant finds her wandering, on a bridge, completely lost on the side of the road, and this starts to instigate the action that takes place. Next slide. So yeah, here's Wendy Crewson as Madeline Montpierre. I love the idea, of course, that it's Fiona's decision to go check into the home. This is not something Grant wants. He thinks he could just take care of her, but she knows something more than that, and she's the one who makes the decision to check in. Does it for different reasons, but and then of course when we meet Madeline at the center, she's always walking down this hallway talking about, oh, there's lots of light, and she has this wonderful kind of positive, upbeat, and somewhat unsentimental character. But this is the transition point from when we move into the facility and start to become start to learn about what goes on there. And I thought it was quite interesting that even right at the beginning, they take us for a visit to the second floor. And although there's no activity, we never see the second floor again, but it helps to sort of, establish in our minds, that there is progress that happens with this disease, and this second floor is waiting. Now, I don't actually know if this is true or not, if these institutions do designate sort of the first floor and second floor this way. I'd be interested in hearing Karen talk a little bit about that. Next scene. Yeah, this is Fiona, of course, taking care of the situation and is going to go ahead with this. And, there's some implication perhaps that this is some kind of punishment for all the affairs he had and all those years when, where she never confronted him. He, in fact, as they say, they always continued to have sex and, and have, that their marriage intact. But there's that fantastic scene in the car, of course, where she very clearly reveals that she knew all the time what was going on, and somehow was able to make peace with it and not either but and is this somehow this going away from him? Is this something to do with all those affairs? I'm not sure. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's the ambiguity, I think, again, that makes it interesting. Next. Yeah, so this is, of course, in fact, I think this is where that, no, this is just, contrast to the early intimacy. This is right before she's about to go to the to the facility. Next. Yeah, again, such a touching moment. Look at their faces and their expressions. And this, I believe, is where the line, I think we can all we can aspire to in this situation is a little bit of grace. Very, very beautiful. Next one. Yeah, here she is, getting, ready to go to Meadow Lake. And, what a together woman, with the jewelry, the hair, the way she dresses, so stylish. And you get the sense that, here's this woman completely in control. But then you look at that expression and it's telling you something. That's not a woman who's completely in control. Very, very wonderful performance. Next. Yeah, so this is, again, sort of a flashback, I think this is taking place again in that car. You never left me. You still made love to me. Despite all those disturbing elements elsewhere, but all those sandals with all those bare female toes, Grant, what could you do? And all of the flashbacks are, I believe, shot in Super 8, which is quite interesting and kind of gives it that kind of period quality and period feel. And I think, again, that was very well handled by the director to use the Super 8 images to talk about the past. Next. This is, again, at Meadow Lake. And, she says to him, I'd like to make love, and then I'd like you to go because I need you to stay here. And you make it hard for me, I may cry so hard I'll never stop. She's really, in many ways, still very much in control of the situation. Next slide. Another flashback, to Grant and Fiona, Super 8. Next. Again, this great hallway. This is a shot after Aubrey has left. He's gone back to Marion and went home, and Julia's just all alone, just walking the halls. You don't know what she's remembering or not remembering. The next scene. Yeah, I mean, again, how do they? This is not in the short story. Them winding up in bed together like this, and again, is Grant doing this to kind of get his way and to convince Marion to bring Aubrey back to the, sell the house and bring Aubrey back to the facility because, in his mind, this is a very selfless act. It's an act of love because he believes that Fiona was happier when Aubrey was there. It's complex and they don't tell you, the answers aren't clear. So I'd love to, hear what you guys all think. I think the audience is asked to make your own decisions about what you feel is happening. Next one. Yeah, this is them going up to the second floor. Look, everybody, of course, looking up, and Fiona certainly not looking upward. Last scene, last one. Yeah, so this is, Aubrey coming back to Meadowvale, Grant thinking, that this was so important. Well, again, I'm not sure it is or it isn't, but what a beautiful moment. And again, for this moment, she does recognize Grant, she was rubbing his earlobes. We've seen that earlier, the affectionate, way in which she rubs his earlobes. And so we have this somewhat kind of, again, I don't think it wraps it all up or tells us, what everything really was meant to be, but it's certainly a moment of grace, I would say. So anyhow, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the slides. So again, really lots to talk about with this film. And I'd like to now ask Karen to join us. And through the magic of technology, Karen is now here. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi.
So before we start taking questions from the audience, I would just, would you like to just tell us a little bit about your thoughts when you were watching the film, and was, did it cringe, or did it feel like they were doing a good job kind of capturing some of the aspects of this horrible illness?
I Loved it. I felt what I loved that I recognized is everything about dementia care is about relationships, everything. And that's what the essence, and you said it right at the beginning there, Fred, that's what this movie is about. It's about relationships. And that's what this movie, I feel, truly captured. And it was one of the first movies about dementia that went there. And also, what I remember at the time, 15 years ago, this was when people that are living with this illness were just starting to get a voice in the media through movies and books. Still Alice had just been released the same year, I believe.
Yep.
So for me, I truly enjoyed it. But like you, when I watched it 15 years ago compared to last week, totally different experience.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I thought was unusual is they'd have no family. They have no children. They don't seem to have close friends. I mean, there's that one dinner party scene where she forgets the word wine. That's unusual, right? Because I would think that this is a disease that usually has a big impact on a whole, on a whole family, on a community, a family. It's very intense how it's really just the two of them.
Well, it's kind of funny that you say that. Yeah, it affects the whole family, but we know families are farther apart now.
That's true.
Geographically and just busy, like people are busier, I think, maybe than days gone by. Fewer children. So we don't have a network of 4 children. So we have this cohort now where maybe there's 3 children if they're nearby.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh, and a lot of caregivers, we really do hear caregivers talk about being alone. Like, I'm on my own. Yes, during the day, friends come by, and that is wonderful. But at the end of the day, we're by ourselves the rest of the time. So I feel with that one scene with the friends is probably a good representation of how it feels.
And I guess you're right, because a lot of people are afraid. They don't understand it. They're uncomfortable being with someone who's experiencing dementia, afraid they'll say the wrong thing or they'll upset them. That must be a huge challenge for these people as the illness progresses, right?
Absolutely. And everybody has their own life experiences that influence your decisions and your actions. And if I had a negative experience, an emotional draining experience with dementia in my past, it makes it really difficult to just go in open, because I have my own issues with it. So there's a lot of barriers for friends and family to overcome in order to have an open and supportive and completely unbiased relationship with people living with dementia. Yeah.
What did you think of the presentation of Meadowvale, of the institution? Romanticized? It almost looked too nice. I wouldn't know, but.
Well, a lot of we have all natural sunlight. Like, okay, come on, there's more to need than that. But I thought that was very cute. The representation of it, in some ways, very regimented, which is the real world when it comes to long-term care. It's tough. It's really tough because every place is so different. But the representation over all of that disconnect, when someone moves into long-term care, and I'm not even talking during the pandemic, that disconnect that you feel, that's what I like that they were really showing.
Oh, is the 30-day thing something that's true?
Never. I will never accept that. So, I was so angry when I was watching that. When someone moves into long-term care, it is not prison. You are allowed to visit them. There are some times when someone is living with dementia, for whatever reason, there may be particular family members that, for whatever reason, don't bring out positive feelings for the resident. So there are times where families are asked, would you mind if maybe your brother didn't visit? Let us kind of, so they'll kind of work around that. So in the movie, that blanket statement, by the way, that was par for the course up until the 80s. That was not uncommon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it did exist
It
as
did
a,
exist.
as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
conceptual idea, but now people realize it's not necessary. And I
No.
assume the second floor and these different that is accurate though often.
Yeah. So when I first started working, I started at Sunnybrook Hospital. It was awful. The higher you up, you went in the building, they said the closer to God you were getting. It was horrible. It was just a horrible analogy, but it was kind of true. Yeah, it was terrible. Now there are many of the newer builds where the ground floor is actually the unit of dementia care, memory care, so that there's access to a garden. Every design is going to be different. So yeah, it's not quite as consistent as it used to be.
Yeah, yeah. And is there anything? Well, what's happening in Hamilton? And I'm just curious. Most of our viewers are from Hamilton, and can you tell us a little bit about what the situation is here? And I'm sure COVID has been an absolute nightmare for you and everybody. But
yeah.
is there? I'm just curious. Is there maybe is there an obvious way people can get in more information or learn more about this subject? And
Absolutely. So, I mean, yes, COVID, I think we all know, has just been a nightmare on so many levels. So the Alzheimer's Society, it's hard with our name. I mean, we were a charity incorporated 30 years ago. And at that time, people barely knew the word dementia.
Right.
The problem with it now is people are more knowledgeable. And when they hear Alzheimer's Society, but there's another type of dementia they're maybe supporting, they don't think to call us. A lot of people don't even know we exist or what we do. So having opportunities like this truly does help. In the greater Hamilton area, we have almost 11,000 people living with dementia.
What? 11?
Huge number, 11,000 people. Yeah.
Is there like a percentage at a certain age or is there?
Okay, this is going to be disheartening, but if you're over age 45, there's changes happening. So really the average age in Canada is 67. That's of diagnosis, but we know that the disease process has already started for a few years for many people before they get a formal diagnosis. The self-awareness that Fiona has in the movie is it's a 50-50. Some people with this diagnosis are aware that changes are happening. There are many people that have this diagnosis are not aware that they have changes happening. So I'm not a problem. I didn't put that pot on the stove. So what do you mean I need to go to the doctor? And that's where so much frustration comes through for everyone. Yeah.
And most people reach you through their primary physician, or
we're an open door. Well, not through COVID, but anybody can call us, and there's no fee to calling. And I can see the website is just being posted. You can, we have, you can email us. I mean, basically we just please get in touch with us. If you are more comfortable speaking with your doctor, they can do a referral and then we'll call you. So really there's no closed door. We'll do, anybody can call us and we're very comfortable, and it's not uncommon, what we call the worried well. So people who are worried, I think there's something going on with me or my neighbor, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get myself assessed, or should I get assessed? People can call us. That's fine. It's a phone call, and we can give you some resources and so on and send you on your way, or begin to have a discussion about supports. And the biggest thing that we do, and it's kind of hard to, unless you've been on this journey to understand what we do, the value of it, it's the emotional support. I mean, look at this movie. This is all about emotions. Yeah. It's not about a skill set of how to help someone have a bath. It's this emotional learning curve that people have. And that's where our counselors just earn their stripes. By being able to navigate those emotions as they change, as this disease changes. And then my role is education. You need the knowledge, you need to understand what's happening and what are your resource options and so on. So that's what we do. And I'm going to get the little plug here, but we are a charity. A lot of people think we're ministry funded. We are a charity. We need donations. We're reliant on them to deliver our programs. So it's kind of a catch-22. Our numbers are growing and other things aren't.
Right. Often people think that the government just takes care of everything, but
you're right.
They really don't, do they?
No.
And what about treatment? Are there advances? Is there research going on? Has much changed in the last 10, 15 years?
Yes. So a lot of pharmaceutical dollars for research was going into how to lower the amount of plaque that's in the brain. Not a lot of success there. I did see a National Post headline came through today about some other research that came
I
through.
saw that, but
And like,
nothing.
I don't know. I kind of feel like I've been around that merry-go-round a few times now. But some of the more exciting research that, well, that piques my interest is, well, how can we avoid getting it in the first place? So
Okay.
instead of treating it, how can we, prevent it?
Right.
And there's all kinds of really, blueberries and coconut oil and vitamin E. And okay, like I'm happy with whatever you want to try. What the research is really talking about is exercise. We just need to start moving more. Yeah, we sit around way too much.
Yeah. So that's a you're right, that's simple and preventative, and that's really the message that probably should go out.
Yeah, but I'm going to jump in there because what I get frustrated with is when we hear stuff like that, I need to kind of qualify it with, but you can exercise and eat organic food and use your brain and be well educated, and you can still get dementia. So
is there a genetic component as well, or?
There is, yeah. And again, we know there's a genetic component, but it's not a gene dominant disease. So it's kind of like genes are part of the repertoire of what come into play, but they're not determinants. There's a rare form of Alzheimer's that's genetically determinant, but that's so rare, I won't even go there. Yeah.
And dementia is the overall term, and Alzheimer's is one aspect of dementia. Is that?
You got it. Yeah. So dementia's, it's kind of like, I don't know, the analogy that works for me, it's like saying fruit,
right?
Like it's an overall term. And then you've got bananas and apples and oranges and so on. You've got all different kinds of things that share those descriptives of a fruit. So Alzheimer's is one of the dementias. Yeah.
And it was interesting in the movie, there's not a lot of reference to any medical terms or a diagnosis, and barely, interaction with the doctor. I guess because there's not much they can do, is there? Right?
Well, and I think Sarah Polley was focusing on relationships,
Yes,
and that's where I think it's coming
not treatment. From. Yes, this wasn't a movie about treatment,
right? Whereas there are other movies where that is part of the dialogue and so on, and that wasn't the case here. So I thought that was a really, really mature decision for her.
Great.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeff? Do you have questions, or someone in the audience have some questions? Please go ahead.
I do. I was wondering, Karen, is there a misconception about dementia and Alzheimer's that you encounter most frequently that you'd like to dispel? Or is there anything that you encounter in your research or?
I think sometimes it's hard for me, and I wouldn't say it's frequent, but it's kind of consistent. When will my husband get violent? What part of the disease will he get aggressive? And I thought this movie, that's one of the things in my notes as I was watching. There were no behaviors. We hear about that all the time, those difficult behaviors. And if you Google dementia and violent, you will get hits. Mm-hmm. That's a bad choice of words. Sorry about that. But that's what I find difficult. And my easiest analogy that I give is put any of us in a traffic jam on a stressful day, and I will display behaviors behind the steering wheel. You don't need dementia to have moments of physical or verbal outbursts. And I think we've got to cut some people some slack. Their brains are doing the best they can, and it's hard. When I hear people say, when will they get aggressive? It's like, oh, well, they might never, and they can, just like us. Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
And another question I have is when we have this moment or this brief, and it's a bit truncated, but it's this moment at the end when Fiona seems to be connecting with Grant again. Is there any explanation as to why sometimes these moments of clarity occur? Or is there something going on that, from your knowledge, that might spur a moment like this?
I believe there's a couple of things that come into play. Who knows? Maybe she'd had a good night's sleep the night before, had a wonderful dinner or lunch, whatever. It was just in that good place. All of us do better when we've had those kind of things taken care of. So that could be coming into play. The other thing is the nature of how the brain is changing. The neurons are doing their thing. So this, it's a horrible visual here, but they're spitting these chemicals. Sometimes the chemicals land in the right place, in the right moment. And that's what happens. It's just luck of the draw. And man, families hang on to that, because it is beautiful when it usually beautiful when it happens. The irony in this movie was painful, for me to see that. The other thing though, the moment at the bridge when he finds her, and yes, he goes over, he kind of calls to her something from the car, hey, how are you doing, or something, but then he doesn't speak. And she goes with him, and it's all about just this calm presence. I would be freaking out, but he was calm, and that's what she needed at that time. I just thought that was a beautiful moment between them. Yeah.
Completely agree.
I was impressed that her character, when she was responding to Grant about why is Aubrey, good for her, and she says it's just uncomplicated. He doesn't confuse me.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of, again, in the book, I can't remember, it was even mentioned in the movie, she had the dogs, right? She had these wonderful dogs, and I guess, Fiona never had children. And I think she has someone to take care of with Aubrey. That must have been something that suddenly gave her meaning, right? I don't think she was in love with him, or there was any, but I guess even if you have no memory, you still have these instincts for caring for people and taking care of people.
Yeah. And especially if it was maybe a need that never really got met.
Right.
So she kind of, when her brain was healthy and she knew she didn't have children, it wouldn't be right to go up to some strange person and help cut their food up. But now the filters are gone, and I have that impulse still, and I can follow through on it. And for some families, and I'm going to go into a bit of a dementia teacher mode here, but in long-term care, people more progressed in the dementia will see them holding baby dolls or stuffed animals.
The baby,
it's the exact same thing. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. It's meeting a need if they have. And some people, it really helps calm them down. And some people it doesn't. For my aunt, it did nothing for her. So, if you try it. And for her, Aubrey was meeting that need.
Any questions from our audience, Jeff?
Yes. We have an anonymous attendee. Might be Margarita. I know sometimes in the past it's been Margarita, but can Karen speak to the realism of the relationship between Fiona and Aubrey and exclusion of Grant? Do you ever see this kind of dynamic occur?
It's really hard, yes. In long-term care, they live there. They live together. The hardest thing is, please, for caregivers that may be listening who have a family member in long-term care, their attention may in the moment focus on someone else. They have not forgotten you. They may not remember your name. They may not remember why you're there, but they know that you're in their orb of people that matter to me. But the rest of the time, when you can't be here, this other person has meaning for me. So yes, relationships develop in long-term care, and this is where I referred to earlier about our counselors. This is where caregivers need support and counseling. And one of the more heartbreaking stories I have was a daughter who was more upset about her father finding I don't want to say a girlfriend, but a companion in long-term care. And she just couldn't handle that. The wife was okay with it, but not the daughter. So that's where we came in and tried to support her. Yeah, not uncommon at all.
Oh, thank you. Also, wasn't the sports announcer an example of one of the other dementias?
Yeah, so frontotemporal dementia. I'm guessing that's what he was displaying, and what a great actor. I mean, I just thought he nailed it so well.
So that was actually based on something from Sarah's own family. Her uncle was a famous radio announcer named Ron Darling. I think he was a hockey, radio announcer or something, and she knew him, and this actually sort of happened to him.
Yeah,
so she actually was pulling on something from her real life, adding that element. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I thought that was
Well
very
done.
well played and very well perfect in context. You know, they
Right.
yeah. So
Well,
yes, you're right.
breaking that tension at the elevator, talking about there's a man with a broken heart and 10,000 pieces or whatever.
Yeah. And even the hockey scene where he's doing the play-by-play and he's nailing it better. Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yes, thank you. Fred, about Alice Munro, do you know how much involvement? Did she have any involvement? Or
We don't, I don't know. The only story I heard Sarah tell was that that Alice had read the script. That with great trepidation, she did read the script and sent Sarah a really nice letter saying how much she enjoyed the script and thought that she had done a wonderful job. No, we have no, not, did she ever see the movie? Don't know. Not unlike many authors, they really don't want to be involved. It's interesting. Some authors want to be really involved and, you know, in the screenplay adaptation, and they can be extremely helpful at times, you know, and give ideas and suggestions, and smart directors will take advantage of them and use them. You know, when I was working with Coppola, you know, with Mario Puzo or S.E. Hinton with The Outsiders, or even John Grisham, he always used to involve the writers of the original material and have them be part of it. Others, they don't want anything to do with it. They just wrote their short story, they wrote their book, and they don't come to the premiere, they don't watch the movie. And from what I understand, that's true of Alice, that she doesn't get very involved or has ever expressed an opinion one way or the other. So we don't.
Wow. Interesting.
excellent. I think, oh, excuse me, we do have one other question. Fiona most probably remembers that she's married to Grant. This is from David Striner, but remembers him as much younger, so may not recognize him. Has that been the experience then?
Yeah, that can definitely come into play because the memories are going point of reference further back in time. So dark hair, maybe no beard, and so on. So this is what's kind of interesting is there's different kinds of memory. His voice seemed to be calming for her, and our voices don't change over time. So quite often when you speak, there's some triggering in a good way that's going on. It's like, okay, this is comfortable. I like this. But to look at you, you don't look like someone that I should really pay attention to, or why they confuse him with the father, or you're my uncle, you know, not my husband. So yeah, that could have come into play why she wasn't recognizing him for sure. Yeah.
By the way, folks, there is, of course, a very recent movie, The Father, you know, with Anthony Hopkins, which is also about this subject. He just won an Academy Award, and very well done, but quite different, you know. But again, if this subject interests you, this is something you should see. And also with Sarah Polley, she hasn't directed a lot of movies, but she made a documentary called The Stories We Tell, or I believe that's the name of the stories that, and it's about her family, and it's about her, how she was raised and how she was brought up, and reveals this incredible story, which is the fact that, and again, I'm not giving it away, it's a documentary, it's called Stories We Tell, and it's actually that her father was not her father, that she was actually, you know, born from a different father and didn't know it, and didn't look like anybody else in the family, and didn't really know what was going on. And the documentary is about her search, actually, and to find her father and to find out, you know, where and all, how this all happened. It's absolutely fantastic documentary. So if you know, again, I just think she's so talented and somebody you should, you know, follow, and doesn't do a ton of work, you know. She's a mom, she does other things, she's an activist, political activist, but and I think she is working on another project right now, but you know, just a great talent. And you know, and as we celebrate Canadian filmmakers, someone that I felt we had to include. And just to wrap up, our next week we'll be watching, hopefully you'll be watching, this incredible film called My Winnipeg. Extremely unusual film from Guy Maddin, you know, another great Canadian filmmaker from Winnipeg. And the story structure is unusual. It's not really a documentary. It's not a traditional narrative film. I'm not really sure how do you categorize it, but Jeffrey will be doing a talk about that film, and we'll have a wonderful guest with us named Greg Klimko. And Greg is also from Winnipeg and been very involved in the Winnipeg film scene, is a friend of Guy's. Also was in Toronto, worked at the Canadian Film Center, film critic, total cinephile, and he'll be joining as a guest later to talk with Jeffrey about Guy and about my Winnipeg. So I hope you can join us for that. Thank you so much, Karen. This was just
Absolutely.
having you here tonight and talk a little about it. It seemed very appropriate and it went great. And unless there are any final questions, Jeffrey, can we wrap up?
We had one final. It was Fiona declined pretty quickly when she moved in. Any thoughts on that, Karen?
Yeah, and that was something that kind of caught my attention, and it was hard to tell exactly the timeline. There were 2 Christmases, but were there maybe 3 or 4? And that is unsettling, just how quickly they show. And even after a month, like even that 30 days, that was oh my gosh. I would be questioning, is there something else going on? So this is a good example. Thank you, Jeffrey, and the person that asked that question. If you are on this journey, please give us a call. It's a simple, just phone us and you'll get your questions answered. We do one-on-one Q&A. So because it is so unique and individual for everybody. So, that's one of the things I wrote down. You can't outsmart dementia. He brought Aubrey back, and darn it, she had a lucid moment. You can't outsmart dementia.
Yep.
Give us a call. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you all. It was great to see everybody. Look forward. Have a good week, good, safe week. Things are opening up. It's kind of exciting, kind of a little scary, but anyhow, onwards and upwards, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.